Hey, this is Kevin Mcelvaney from Pro Wrestling Illustrated. You're watching the 3 Count Podcast.
Do you wanna get live with me? Do you really wanna ride with me? I'm in the club, baby, grind on me.
Welcome everybody to another great edition of the 3 Count Podcast presents Now Entering, and I'm your host, Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you out that mountain called wrestling. And by now, with our 5th season happening right now, I would just hope you say with me, I am your Sherpa, because like your tribal chief, acknowledge me. But like every good Sherpa, you gotta have someone who's been there, done that, and can do it more efficiently. You can. That's why it's never about me. It's about who's entering the ring. So who's entering the ring? You can find this man as the editor-in-chief in PWI. You can find this man in Pro Wrestling and Illustrated, and you can also find him quite being taller than you, because actually that was something that was very unexpected for me. And then he's the guy who'll ask you the tough questions. He is Kevin Mcelvaney.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited because, it was, we had met at Wrestling Independent, and then from there, we just started kicking around, having a great conversation with Pure Ignorance and stuff like that. And I was like, yo, we got to bring this guy on the podcast, just have a full conversation with him, because, this is the man that if you guys are ever trying to figure out, this is the man with the list. That's that guy.
Yeah, people find out and then I hear it. But hey, you gotta have somebody to level your anger at. And it's not poor Bill Apter. He's off doing his own thing.
But no, it's cool because like the best thing about you though is that like you have all these great issues that come out for Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and they're always just great because you get to interview like some of the top names in the industry, but then you also get to like put your own spin out there with your own opinion pieces and stuff. So I definitely, as a fan, just like PWI, but then also getting to interview a couple of people that you have also tied with, right? So Ty McKenna being on the show, Righteous Reg being on the show, like having these great interviews with these people and talking to them and stuff. I was like, yo, like, of course we got to bring that head person on because like he's the guy that like ultimately, matters.
I appreciate that. I'm not as entertaining as either Kaya or Reg, but I'll try my best.
It's all good. No. So really, like, we'll start this off, right? Because as you started out as like a freelance writer and then worked your way up into the company, like, but who is Kevin? Like, who are you? Like, give us your insight.
Oh, it's kind of hard to distill. I'm not all that complicated. like you said, PWI is something I was doing for a long time as a freelancer. I've been a wrestling fan, with a couple of breaks earlier on in my years, pretty much all my life. And read PWI growing up, read the other magazines that were out there, The Wrestler, Inside Wrestling, Sports Review Wrestling, and then, of course, the WWF and WCW magazines, read those too. And it really got me, it's going to sound pretentious, but it got me interested in the written word. I mean, it got me more interested because I had those all over the house. I just wanted to find out more and more about the wrestlers I watched on TV. I had, the magazines like PWI taught me more about the wrestlers I was not seeing on TV, people who were, either from the past or they were in what was left of the territory era at that point. I'm dating myself a little bit, but that's the early 90s. And, I grew up reading those. And I mean, there's pictures of me reading them as a kid. There's, it was, and back then, I guess probably somewhere in there is when they relocated from Rockville Center, New York to Philly, well, just outside of Philly. And I grew up in Philly. And when I was in college, I saw, like PWI is actually pretty close by. Maybe I'd do an internship with them. And, it ended up not happening for various reasons that are basically all my fault. I didn't do what I needed to do to get it set up in time. And then after college, there was a job at the parent company, Kappa Publishing, I applied for. It was filled by the time my application went through, but Stu Sachs saw my writing samples. He liked them. And then he invited me to start doing freelance with them. So I started out with the Wrestler and Inside Wrestling, and then moved up to PWI, contributed throughout the years. I wasn't necessarily like in every issue. There were stretches where I wasn't doing anything at all for them, but I kept that relationship going. Stayed in good with Stu. I mean, even if I wasn't actively contributing, like I would check in with him. I would ask if there was anything. I'd throw a pitch out there. There's value to doing that because we kept a strong relationship going on over the years. And then what happened was when Stu was ready to retire, he had to think about who was going to replace him. And having been in touch with me and not just, editing my writing, he'd seen the other work I'd been doing. He'd been a reference for me for other jobs. He knew, oh, okay, this guy has a lot of marketing experience now. This guy knows digital content now. This guy can do this and this and this. And I know he has a good head on his shoulders. I'm going to see if he's interested. And then lo and behold, late 2019, he starts talking to me about this. Early 2020, finally got everything together and got it approved. And since March 2020, it's been a lot of my life. It's been most of my waking hours some days, I feel like I'm editing in my sleep other days. It's not the only thing I do, but it is very central. And I'll tell you, it is very different, enjoying wrestling as a fan and sometime member of the media, as opposed to like, that's all you do. It is different, but I still just love the hell out of it. So.
And I think that's important, right? It's like you find this thing that you like enjoy, you want to do, and then it doesn't really like take away from like the things you love, because it's ultimately, like you said, like the thing that you love the most. And it's like you can get that, you don't really gain that like anywhere else when you find something you love. It doesn't feel like work. I guess it's also what I'm trying to get with it, because it's like you said, right? You're editing in your sleep, but then you're like enjoying it, and then you're going to these press conferences and you're enjoying those press conferences, junkets, and then you go over to talking to interviews with like wrestlers individually, and it never feels like work. I know, like when we started this show, right? Actually, funny enough, January of 2020, when we started Now Entering the Ring, which actually was May of 2020, I never found it difficult to just sit around and have fun and talk with people, because ultimately I think like all these conversations is just fun, and that's all it is. And I don't know, it's weird, we're almost like 400 episodes into this show now, and I'm like, bro, this is just, it's a breeze, because you're meeting someone that's very passionate about the things that you're passionate about, and then you guys just like bond and then continue to grow a cool ass relationship. And I think it's important that you had mentioned that, right? Like you have all these relationships that you're building, but even if you're not doing anything with them, it's always nice to just kind of like drop in and check in with people and just see like how they're doing, right? Because I know for me, there's been go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I never in a million years thought when I was doing this, like, oh, one day Stu's going to remember how much I kept in touch. Like that didn't enter my mind. I thought like, oh, he could be kind of stoic sometimes. He doesn't like to think of himself that way, but especially like if you're emailing him or if he's texting you or something like that, he can come across kind of stoic. And it could be hard to read him sometimes. But aside from that, didn't cross my mind. So when he called me the one day, I'm like, he's like, I need to step out into the parking lot. I have to call you. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then it was that. So it's just, and I wasn't doing it for that reason. And not everybody you keep in touch with casually throughout the years is going to net you a business benefit later on, but that's not the reason to do it anyway, So
right.
That's
it is. Yeah, you get into doing those things because you have a genuine care, right? And it's like you said, right? Like you weren't looking at it to like, hey, I'm going to be like the next great big thing. I'm just going to get into this position. You're like, no, I'm just here just to help out and do what's best for whatever the case is. For you, in this case, it would be for like the business. And I think like just growing and cultivating those relationships and making sure that people understand that you're just being genuinely who you are is important.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I think that's important in any line of work, in and around wrestling, certainly no exception, especially, I mean, you look going back, trace it back to the carnival days of wrestling. I mean, the reason trust is so important in the industry is because you had to let people in on this secret. And if someone spills the beans out, that's all over, you're just, okay, you're done, So even today, when everybody knows what's going on, or they think they do, there are still secrets you have to keep. There are results, there are plans that you have in place. There are things that have to be, you could share them with some people, but you can't share them with everyone. And if everybody knows about it, it's going to be a problem. It ruins the mystique and the experience. So I think, you can't really, it can seem sometimes like it's difficult to get in because, you have to go and shake hands and have conversations with people, but that's how you build trust. So it's important.
It's exactly how you build a relationship, but everything starts off with a handshake too. And then, I think this is like the only industry that I know where like a handshake is everything. Like, like you have to learn how to do certain it's, I don't know. To me, I want to keep that secret kind of hidden, but you know, certain things mean certain meanings, and I'm like, yo,
Sure.
this is crazy. Like I didn't truly like, I didn't truly grasp it until my trainer actually broke it down to me, and then when he broke it down to me, I was like, oh, I got you. This
Right.
is crazy.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, it's still this secret club, even though it's more accessible than it's ever been. It's still it's this club. Um,
Yep.
and, and I think that's doubly important for someone who's, well, I shouldn't say doubly important. It's just as important and maybe more for somebody who's not trying to break in as a wrestler and who's trying to break in some other way, because it's like, well, what are your intentions, friend? What are you trying to do here?
Yeah.
Like, what are you getting at? What do you want? Like, are you here to exploit this? Or because it's natural to be a little distrustful, especially if it's somebody who's like an unknown quantity. So in my case, it was actually kind of interesting because starting as editor right at the beginning of the pandemic, everything was virtual. And then for me, it was a little bit longer after that, because my wife was battling cancer at the time, and she that was something that we found out in 2020. And I think we would have been very, very careful and not really going anywhere all year anyway, but we kept doing it we loosened up bit by bit, but like into 2022, like we were still wearing masks out places, things like that, when a lot of other people had stopped, because we just didn't want to risk it for her sake. And at the same time, really missed getting out, and she did too. I mean, she wasn't the wrestling fan that I am, but we would go out and we would go to these shows together and enjoy them. And I'm like, oh yeah, gosh, like we haven't been able to do this in a few years. And you forget how important that is, that being in the same room with people and enjoying like the live spectacle, because that's ultimately what it's all about.
Yeah, I know for me, when the pandemic when they started loosening up the restrictions, like I had started actually training in January of 2020. So like that was a very interesting moment that in March everything shut down. And then for me it was like, all right, so what are we gonna do? And I think I wrestled like 4 matches in 2020, which was kind of a nice little like jump into the business, because it's like, well,
Yeah.
everything's just getting started back up so I can get started with it. But it was I remember I had to go to West Virginia for a show, and I was like, "Bro, I'm going 5 hours away to wrestle." And I'm like, I'm gonna be, I'm gonna mask up, I'm gonna keep doing this, and then I'm just keep myself kind of like away from people for a little bit. I remember having like that initial fear, and then like as like the year kind of wore on, and not the year, but as the whole year, right? Not just the calendar year, but the
Yeah.
whole year, coming back to that same moment again a year later, I was like, oh, all right, so we're kind of a little bit different now. So we're kind of a little bit more open. We're kind of a little bit more free to do things. And it was like,
Right. Right.
but yeah, it was, I remember it was a nuts time too.
It was. And I mean, you could only physically wrestle certain places, and other places that were doing it were basically doing it illegally. So it was like you wanted to go out and make your money and get your reps in, but you also couldn't promote it too heavily because you didn't want to get it shut down. So there was all that. It was, as far as it was a great time for catching up on wrestling that, all of us were behind on, or from different eras. It was awesome for that. But it was tough because a lot of people were just starting to make a living or just getting into it. Like you, I think, Kaya started in 2020 as well. I'm sure she talked about that
Yeah.
when she was on here. That's a really tough time to start out, you know, in a business where you are reliant upon being in crowded rooms, sweating on other people. Like it's a tough time to break in.
Well, I think about like some of the creative things that people do, like Joey Janela, like he had the I think he called it the 6 foot quarantine match, where
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, it was so interesting to see. And then obviously like, we got the greatness of like, other matches that were coming out, but it was just like everybody was trying to find a way to be innovative
yeah.
and still keep wrestling alive. And it was just, I don't know, to me, it was so much fun to like watch people like break into these new routines and do things. But now, like, obviously we're back into full crowds and people like wrestling, and,
Yeah.
some people still wear masks, some people not wearing masks. People just, I don't know. To me, it's great to be a part of like all of this all over again and just kind of see everything grow the way it's growing.
Absolutely. And for me, it's good to get out. And I mean, there's people I've been talking to for years at this point who I'm just getting in the same room with for the first time, because, they either haven't been out this way, or I haven't been out their way, or, you know, like for a while, like I said, I couldn't just physically get it in the shows. And these are some cases people I, you know, had phone calls with and interviewed and all this other stuff, but so we've never been in the same like meet space, so to speak. It's interesting you bring up the social distancing thing because, you know, a lot of like old school people crapped on it, but
Yeah.
Stu Sachs was as old school as anybody, but he had a sense of humor. I showed him that match. He cracked up. He thought it was hilarious. He said, "Oh yeah, you should post that like on our social or something and like tweet it out." And like, yeah. So it is.
I think that's where I saw it first. Was
yeah, maybe
on the socials, and then like I was like, "Yo, this is actually interesting." And I went back and watched. I was like, "Yo, I like this match a lot."
It's funny because like they had the timing on everything was once or twice maybe a little off, but like really good overall. Like they're, you know, like the timing of the drop kick connecting with the air and then the bump. It's just it's it's great. It's really it's the details are awesome. And I think there was there a switch a back and forth like pinning combination sequence, I think, like the schoolboy and a Lamach and you get to put your own hand through your own leg and
and like there was like the stalemate, like that's what made it great too. Yeah. I did. I thought that was great. I really like I had a huge passion. And I remember like talking to people about like some of the matches I've seen. Like somebody asked me recently at my job, at my shoot job, they're like, what's one of your favorite matches that people don't talk about? And I was like, oh well, it's gotta be Invisible Stan versus Invisible Man. I was like, this is the wildest thing ever. I was like, I've never seen a crowd get so, and it shows like two things. It shows like how important one, the referee is in wrestling, but then also like how important the crowd is for something like this. And I showed that match to a friend of mine, and he was like, I can't believe. He's like, I'm glued to this. He's like, I'm not a pro wrestling fan, but I can't stop watching this. I was like, I know, it's so great.
It's, you know, the one thing though, I do worry about the talent, and Man and Stan took some crazy bumps in that match. I don't know what they were thinking. You know, they gotta play it safer next time.
Super unsafe in certain spots. I was definitely worried. I was glad that, you know, we had special sunglasses that we could see them with, because I was in fear, man. I was in fear at certain points. Yo, let me ask, like, because you did mention that, you know, getting into the business in a different role, right, is definitely tough. It's hard, and you have to be kind of careful with everything. But what's like one of the biggest challenges that you've had being in this industry, especially on the outside?
You know, part of it is navigating relationships with promotions, and a lot of them were already built. But in some cases, especially like non-English speaking companies, they really were not. And you kind of had to, you start with a very cold outreach, like ice cold. Hey, I'm Kevin. I'm taking over as editor of Pro Wrestling. And they've at least maybe heard of the magazine. So it's not completely, but they also don't know me from anybody else. And then just trying to get in on like the ground floor with some of them, like, and it's easier some places than others. Like WXW in Germany, very easy. Everybody in Germany speaks English better than we do. So it's just, it's, I'm exaggerating, but not by much. It's wild. But they, you know, that was a really easy one. But then you have some of the Joshi leagues that had like hardly any public presence, and you really had to dig to be able to figure out how to even get the contact info for the person who has the keys to interviewing people and things like that. So that, I mean, that was a challenge. I don't know that it's the hardest thing, but as far as like, as an outsider, the hardest thing is, it's the running the magazine, meeting the deadlines, making sure everything gets together, juggling people's contributions, whether that's, you know, photography or written word or cartoons or whatever it may be. And then, you know, kind of getting it all reviewed and making sure it's accurate. You know, I'd like to make this comment all the time about, well, I shouldn't say all the time, but I've made this comment more than a few times about the PWI 500, because inevitably somebody will point out like a typo or something, and there's some errors that, and I mean, we could talk about them if you want, but like it's like, okay, yeah, that's fair, like drag us for that. But then some other stuff will be like, oh, this person didn't win the match at this pay-per-view. That's when they had their first defense, you fool. And then like, yes, that's a dumb mistake. But there are thousands, there are 500 entries, and then each entry has like 9 or 10 different things in it you have to fact check. And we do that, but it's largely me doing that. And then it's just, we have a proofreader who does some of that, but she's not really a wrestling person. So she basically, I'm relying upon our freelancers to do their due diligence when they turn it in, and most of them are very good about that. And then sometimes you have to tweak some things around and reword, and there's just so many opportunities for things to go wrong that as hard as we work on it and as many hours as we put into it, I'm astounded that we don't have more of those like small typographical errors or like minor factual inconsistencies every year. So I when somebody calls us on them, it's just like, yeah, sorry, that was one of the 5,000, not even exaggerating, micro decisions we had to make within that issue, and we messed up that one. Like, it's, you can only be so worried about it.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger thing, is that sometimes like people like, it's like they demand like perfection and something that they themselves wouldn't even be. I just mean like, if they were to put together, like, you just like, for those who just didn't realize, like, pulling the curtain a little bit back on that, like, my man out here reviews all 500, like, you're reviewing all 500 mainly, right? Just imagine, right? And for you out there that are watching this right now, you have 500 single art, and more than that, actually, we're talking, I'm sure you probably get like close to like 6,000-7,000 entries of just like wrestlers in the US. Like, just
you're reviewing, yeah, because you're paring down the list. And then you have stuff like, and there have been times when people have been left off. And a really embarrassing one this past year was Naito, which was obviously not on purpose. And like, every time I use him as the example, and I feel bad because I don't think he's insignificant or anything like that. But I've used the example of like Aaron Henare, who at the time was basically a job guy in New Japan, was on the list. And like, you really think we made a choice to put Aaron Henare on the list? We're like, no, Naito sucks this year. We're getting rid of him. It's just, so it was, but that was the one thing I stepped in and I actually addressed, because I had a lot going on at the time. I actually, I didn't necessarily put this out there, and it's sad, but that's when we found out my wife was moving to hospice care. It was literally that day that the issue dropped, and I had everything scheduled ahead of time. And then I met with her doctors, and I come back and people are messaging me, and I'm getting alerts. I'm like, good Lord. And I eventually made and I said, this is the only thing I'm addressing, and I said, my wife's in the hospital. I'm not addressing anything else. And other people are like, bro, sorry about your wife. Your list sucks. I'm like, what? But it's not even like, I say, like, you'd never say that to me in the real world. And I'm a very unthreatening person. But it's not because, oh, you think this guy's going to go after me. It's just, you wouldn't dare say that to another person in the flesh, like, unless you're just a complete asshole. Like, it's just, but people they feel so emboldened. So certainly, like if you see something wrong, and like, let us know, and we'll do our best to correct it. And that's appreciated. And we're not above criticism, but we're also like human beings trying our best. We're not Rolling Stone or Time or whatever. We have this massive staff of people in the office poring over these entries. We have a small ratings committee. We have the people who write the entries, and then basically it's one or two people doing all the work from there, along with a small team of designers. And I mean, that's a reality of a lot of legacy publications like PWI that are not part of these gigantic media empires. They're left with kind of small staffs and a lot of freelancers. So we do our best. So I just like to put that out there where I can, and it's not to make anybody feel bad or feel like they can't criticize, but just have a little bit of perspective before you say these people are incompetent or whatever, because we'll get that. And that's, look, incompetent, I mean, like, smelly, lazy, but no, like, not fun to be around. Sure. Call any of that. I don't know. I think we're at least a little bit competent.
I'll say it for you. Chill the fuck out. Sometimes, like, you just need to chill out. Like, hey, a misprint or maybe something not being, 100. Yeah, hey, chill out. Like, it's fine, right? Like, we're literally throwing a fit about something that, like, we enjoy as kids. Like, stop it. Nobody out here in that business is perfect. Like, just chill out. You don't need to be all that on your high horse, right?
Yeah.
But no, it's crazy because, like, there's just like so much that like goes into, especially when we talk about like the list and any of your guys' list that you have, like, whether it's tag team, it's the women's, or even just like the 500 itself. There's like I can only imagine like having to go through and like read every single person who puts an entry in and then decide, are we really going to put this person in that 500? What are their qualifications for this person? And like trying to have that conversation, especially if there's only like 4 or 5 or even 6 people who are like trying to determine, like the committee themselves, like figure out, yeah, this is the person that we think we should be in there. And here's why we think that. And to me, I was like, I know in the area that, that when I moved, before I moved from the DMV to the Northeast, just even in there, I mean, just in the DMV itself, there's already like 7, 8, I don't know, maybe close to 1,200 wrestlers at any given time, right? And then you think about moving to the Northeast, and and I'm gonna be real, it was a bigger shock. I was expecting a bigger shock, like a big shock, but it was a bigger shock for me. There's like at any given time, there's like 30 promotions running on a weekend, and there's like thousands of wrestlers like all over the place. So for y'all to be able to eliminate it down to 500, to me, I'm just like, hey, yo, y'all, you're doing great.
Thank you. I mean, so the reality is we're trying to do a better job every year than the year before. And some of that means like, oh yeah, we did kind of not look close enough at this area. And sometimes it's this country, like there's oh wow, there's a surprising amount of exciting wrestlers coming up in Scandinavia the past couple of years, which was not really a thing before. So like we look at that and we try and adjust, and like, while we have to rate these people against each other who really had no interaction or chance for it, and we have to weigh the significance of this person in this regional territory versus this person in this regional. And then we look at, well, who did they face? Did they travel at all? Did they go against people from outside of their territory? Were they in a promotion that streamed somewhere? Were they do they have a big social media presence and following? And it's not all of it, but that's influence. It's one of the criteria, so we have to look at that. And certainly, like, we have the meeting, and we don't just wait for all these submissions to come in, because the submissions by and large are coming in. I think
like the day before.
Well, no. We don't open up the submissions until after our meeting, and it's kind of intentional because we want to look kind of objectively at everybody who's on our radar first. And then that helps us usually with some people that I would say there's a good handful of people every year who were not on the list. And then after reviewing their submission, like, oh, like either this person was not known to us previously, or, oh, this person had a better year than we realized. And then, we have to verify everything and all that. But because anybody can say anything on those. And occasionally someone does. I think it was, who's the guy? I think Big Calix made up a story about being like, whose son did he say he was? Like Bruiser Brody's or something. Like he made up a story about being someone's son. And then like later he tweeted about it, and I happened to see it. I'm like, I saw that. Nobody fell for that. He was just goofing around. He wasn't trying to like, make it a thing, but it was, anyway. So we look at these, and in a lot of cases, I would say a good half or more are people we already know about. In some cases, they're already on the list. So it's not a situation where someone doesn't submit, they have no chance of being on it. But if you're someone who's kind of like on the come up and you're not sure if you're on the radar, it does not hurt to submit and have your qualifications in there, because that sometimes it's like, oh yeah, well, I mean, really, if we're putting this person on here, shouldn't we have this person instead, or make room for this person somewhere in there? And it is a lot, but we have, I mean, the community is we do keep it kind of on the small side, partly, and we have more freelancers in this, but usually the committees, at least the singles committees for the 500 and the women's lists, tend to be 6 or 7 people. The tag list it's pretty much just been me and Al Castle doing all that. And part of the reason for that is the tag list is new, and the requirements for it are a little bit different. And we're still sort of figuring out what that list is. And there's been, each year it's been done, there's been some level of change to it, just because it's kind of hard. We're trying to do a lot at once. The tag list is completely merged. It's not men's or women's. It's everybody is on it, regardless of promotion. Trios are on it. So there can be a lot of different ways teams can qualify or not qualify. But yeah, we bring this on ourselves. So,
But the cool thing about the PWI 500 is that it's inspired other things to happen, like the Black Wrestlers list, right? So Reggie, obviously, Reg holding that down, right? And then you look at I don't know if you saw recently, but there was like a Hispanic Latin wrestler list that was
Very
dropped,
nice.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so we're starting to see like everybody trying to branch out and kind of like put their own thing together and their own twist to it. Like I'm very excited because I think it brings eyes to a lot of wrestlers that people probably didn't see before. And then they start looking, because I know, like, I remember the first time that Brian dropped the HLW list, like people were coming at him because like, you don't even have people from Texas, or you don't have people from New Mexico, you don't have people from like this. He's like, listen, he's like, I'm one dude from New York. Like
Brian's just doing this. Brian's just doing this to try to spotlight some people. And I've said this before too, like, hey, at least with us, if you're going to criticize us for the PWI list, we're selling a magazine that contains the list, and you could say, oh, what a shoddy product to put out there. If other people are doing this out of the goodness of their heart and they're doing it to spotlight underrepresented communities, come on. Plus, I'll flat out say, like, we've looked at, especially Reg's list, and especially a couple of years ago, like when I was first getting in as editor, it's like, oh, wow, who are these people? Like, I've never heard a bunch of these names. And you start looking them up, and it's like, okay, someone to keep an eye on. Okay, someone else to keep an eye on. Whoa, this person had like 4 different regional territories in 3 different states. Why are they not on our list? So it really does. And it's not just us. I mean, it's like, I don't know concrete for sure, but I'm like 95% or higher sure that Reg's constant championing of someone like Will Hobbs got them on AEW's radar and got them a contract. Now, I'm not saying Reg got him signed. I just think like they weren't really looking at Will Hobbs before that. And then they used him when they used him on Dark, and like, oh, we really like this guy. Again, not inside, not anything Reg told me, not anything Will told me, but you can see how like someone becomes like, I don't want to say flavor of the day, because obviously like he's a talented guy, but someone who's like very popular in the moment and buzzworthy, and then like all of a sudden they're working on TV, and that's happened a few times. And it's always warranted. This is not like, oh, Reg talked Will up and then Will should have been on TV. But I think someone like Reg, who has a big Twitter following, has this influence, talking about him is super helpful. And I think that's what's good about these lists, apart from everything else, is it can actually help people make more money. So, and feed their families and, travel the world. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no doubt. And it kind of helps, like you said, it just, you put that spotlight on somebody and they just like, you never know what happens, right? You get this opportunity and then they kind of like explode off that opportunity. Speaking of opportunities, all right, so you're here, you're the head dude, the editor-in-chief, right? What do you want the legacy of PWI to be? Like, how do you want to lift and put your, I guess we'll call it your inch of lifting the bar up? Like, what are you looking for?
So what my predecessors generally said was something to the effect of, we want to document pro wrestling like in a fair and like cohesive kind of way, and then at the same time enhance people's enjoyment of it. So I look at it as our responsibility to do that. The way I would say my stamp is added on it is maybe increasing the breadth of what that is, and doing more international coverage, doing more independent coverage, doing coverage that was, for whatever reason, not so much in the magazine before. We've done not a ton of it, but we've done some stuff on Deathmatch, and that was something that, they were understandably a little bit reluctant to do before I came in. And it's not, it's not that there isn't a long history of wrestling magazines with blood all over them, but there's something about Deathmatch that scares some people. And it's like, well, no, if it's done in relative safety, and there are compelling stories, and there are wrestlers that you can really get behind, it can be a beautiful thing. So whether it's that, whether it's Joshi, like there's been a lot more Joshi coverage in the magazine, and I'm very proud of that. I would like to see more coverage of Lucha Libre in the magazine, and we've improved a little bit over the last couple of years, but I think we could do a lot more in that regard. More wrestling like from Europe, from all over. I just want to have these documents. Like if people go and, I don't know if you kept any magazines you had from when you were younger, but it's fun to be able to just pull them out and see where wrestling was at a given time. And like, oh my God, this is when this person was doing this and this person was doing this. And then this is where the 2008 roster was stacked thing comes from. It's like, wow, like we didn't even realize at the time how cool it was to exist as a wrestling fan. And right now, whew, it is such an exciting time to be a wrestling fan. So to kind of leave some kind of document of that, you know, we have a digital edition, but I love our print magazine, and I think people will be very glad to have these, you know, years down the line. That's what I want to do.
So for me personally, like when I grew up, like I was a 90s kid, right? I was born in 85. There's your date for all y'all out there.
Oh yeah, we're a year apart. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I go through, and I remember like sitting there and just watching certain events happen and unfold, right? So for me, like one of my favorite matches that had happened, right, was and I'm sure a lot of people will agree with this, Halloween Havoc 97, right? But going back and reading the WCW magazine and seeing the pictures and stuff like that, I'm like, it's such a nostalgic feeling for me, and it brings me back to like that moment of when I was a kid, you know, 12 years old, watching this happen and seeing Rey Mysterio, you know, go from being on the ground to popping up the top rope to hitting the flash DDT, and then seeing the picture of the moonsault like coming over the top with Eddie. I'm like, bro, like it rushes all those feelings back. So yes, like I don't have that magazine anymore, unfortunately, but that I remember going back like years and then just looking at it again and just
it makes you want to watch that match again. And then after you watch the match, you can still admire it. Like Issa Marie, who's one of our photographers, and she's actually just gotten back from Japan, where she took a whole bunch of awesome photos, and we're gonna have some of them in the next issue after the awards issue. But she said something to the effect, because I've been dabbling in photography myself for like the last year, and I'm not good at it, but I'm getting better at it. And you know, there's practical reasons for that. I can get to a lot of these events myself and talk to people and take pictures and blah blah blah. And I wouldn't put anything in the magazine I didn't think was solid, but Issa's like amazing. And she said I was showing her a photo. I'm like, oh, I'm pretty proud of this one, because you can sort of see like this moment from the match, like where this wrestler is applying the hold and trying to hold on to it, and then this wrestler's trying to break out, and you see each of their struggles in this. And she said, that's exactly why I love photography, because it can show, tell a story in a single image when it's done right, in just this beautiful way. And I think, you know, these feature stories in the magazines and things like that could do the same thing. And I think the photos, you know, again, do the same thing. It would never replace wrestling. You know, if you could only ever read the magazines, you'd be like, man, I really miss watching wrestling. But I think the point is that it makes you want to go and watch, and it makes you want to check out new things, and revisit some of your old favorites. And I don't know. Sorry, to me, I just think it's pretty cool.
No, I 100% agree. As a person that like remember watching it, or like say even look through like WCW's magazines when Goldberg was like being a feature attraction. I remember like I forget which article it was, but they were showing him like inside, and the fireworks were hitting him, and I was like, oh yeah, this is still super cool. Like to go back and watch it. So yep. I could relate. Some people who are watching the show currently don't even know what a magazine is, which, you know, we understand. It happens. Like go to your local library. You'll find it there.
That's right. No, we love that. We have a lot of libraries that carry it, which is an awesome thing. And just shout out to libraries in general. I think most people don't realize all the cool stuff you can get from your library. Like you can get, you know, audiobooks, and like you can just get them on your phone. Like you don't have to go and like get a tape out like you used to, or a CD out, or whatever. Like you can just like get like the Libby app, or there's a couple other apps like that the libraries use. You can use it to stream stuff. You can read magazines digitally on your phone. You can, or your iPad or whatever. You know, sometimes you can get like, oh, my library does passes to like this museum that costs $30 to get in. Well, why wouldn't I like take the pass out and go to the museum for free? Like it's a quick life hack. Like it's a good way to spend a day, you know? So anyway, library, if nothing else, let's change the legacy question. I want people to go to libraries.
Go to the library. Guys, just go to the library. That's what we want you to do. I know personally myself, like I have the Libby app on my phone as well, from both Maryland as well as in Massachusetts. And I listen to Be Like Water from Bruce Lee, the Bruce Lee book, read by Shannon Lee, his daughter. So if you guys didn't know, there you go. You can check that out. All right, so we're gonna move I got one more question, and then we're gonna move into my favorite part of the 3 Count podcast. And that question is, it's just simple, right? I need one do and one don't of a good interview.
Ooh, I'm guilty of this occasionally, but every wrestler everywhere tells you that they are very sick of being asked how they got into the business. So unless it's somebody who's completely not documented at all, like there's nothing online about them, like this is their first interview, they really don't have much else out there, don't ask that question. A do is to actually try and establish a rapport with somebody. Don't necessarily dive right in. Question. And you could do this off air. Like if you want your podcast to be like very tight and to the point, you could talk with them a few minutes before you go on. But honestly, people like hearing a little bit of that back and forth. So don't be afraid to do it on air either. I think either way you could do it, it works, but you gotta establish rapport.
Yeah, I like that too. I feel like because I the way I even like when I go to approach wrestlers, and anybody who's been a part of this show can tell you this is what I say. I tell them all, I'm like, yo, like, we gotta treat this podcast like the Joe Rogan Experience, or even just like Chris Van Vliet, shout out to Chris, insight. And it's just a conversation. And it don't worry, like I'll have some kind of questions, but they usually don't fire off like a lot. If the conversation is going smooth and I don't gotta ask the questions, we ain't asking no questions. We just have a fun time talking.
Yeah. And then obviously if you're getting into really hard-hitting interviewing later on, the rules of engagement are a little different. Like if you're trying to get scoops and stuff, that's a little different. But in general, like you're trying to start a podcast or do interviews for like a blog or a zine or something, follow those too. And I think that's really helpful.
I like that. All right, so we're gonna hop into my favorite part of the 3 Count podcast. It is the 3 Count podcast, 10 count questions, and Mr. Kevin, this is how it works. I'm gonna fire off 10 questions at you, rapid fast, and whatever your answer is, that's your answer.
Oh God! All right.
Yeah.
Try to keep it brief, like a couple words, kind of thing.
Sure.
Okay. I didn't know how brief it.
Yeah.
It's not. What is that? What does this word make you think of?
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
not at all. But we'll put on the imaginary timer for added pressure.
Okay. Sure.
And in the words of my favorite commentator, Mike Goldberg, here we go. SmackDown or Raw?
SmackDown.
Favorite cartoon?
Simpsons.
Ooh, let's go. Marvel or DC?
Marvel.
Favorite actor?
Tough one. I'm gonna go outside the box and say Jack Lemmon.
Let's go. That's a great call out. That's the first time we've had that call out here.
Yeah.
Apple or Android?
Apple.
Favorite movie?
My all-time favorite movie is probably Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, which is a very weird movie.
It's a very good movie. It's a very, very good movie.
It is a good movie. I love it.
Spaghetti or lasagna?
Spaghetti.
Let's go. Favorite podcast?
Is it diplomatic to say this one? Does that work?
No, it's fine. You can say this one. You can say your own. It doesn't matter.
Okay, let's say
we understand.
Pro Wrestling Indie Strated.
Yeah. Nominate one person you want to see on this podcast.
Ooh. Without having the list of people, of everybody who's been on. Have you had Eel O'Neill on?
Yeah, he's actually a good friend of mine. I'm not gonna front.
Have him on.
I love Eel. Eel has actually been on the show twice. Part of this one. Yeah, we'll put a 3 on there.
Eel is just can talk about anything and is you're friends with him. So
yeah. He was the guy, so we hit the time on the buzzer. So he was on our show and he said this thing and it like awoken something in me. Actually, I'm sorry, he wasn't on the show when he said it. We were at a wrestling company and I was talking about like moving up to Massachusetts and I was like, I'm kind of nervous, but everybody keeps talking about using your network and stuff like that to help get bookings and stuff like that. And I was like, I want to stand on my own work. And he goes, do you go to Netflix? Do you watch Netflix? And I was like, yeah, I watch Netflix. He's like, do you read every single caption that you see in Netflix, or do you just go out with your friends till you should watch? And I was like, oh, this is so good. And I was like, yeah, I definitely go by suggestions what my friends say. And that it woke like a whole bubble in me. And I was like, oh wow, I never even thought about it that way. And yeah, he's a connoisseur with like just getting people to realize what they're trying to accomplish. So yeah, very big shout outs to
I'll put, so if you've had him twice, I'll give you another one. DMV person, not anymore, but formerly the DMV. Have you had Lachlan McGrath on, Lolo?
No, actually, I haven't.
Yeah, you should have them on. They can talk again similarly. Just we'll talk about anything. Super chill vibe. Occasional contributor to PWI, has done promoting, has done all sorts of stuff. Runs a bar out in Chicago now. Just super fascinating person. Highly recommend having them on.
Definitely, we'll definitely do that. And then last but not least, my favorite question to ask every single person that comes on this show: favorite curse word?
Fuck.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's weird. It shouldn't even be like a debate.
I avoid saying it mostly on podcasts, but in my everyday life, oof. That's a different story.
Yeah, I feel like that's like on this podcast, like this. It depends on like how my guests like respond to questions, right, and stuff like that. We start talking. Like most times, like it'll keep everything pretty professional, and other times, like it could just be a whole episode of just us personally. Right? Yeah.
It's interesting you did that with the rapid fire. I was surprised that I said Marvel because I read more DC, but like obviously the movies, Marvel has it all over DC, so it's just. I shouldn't say obvious, but I think that's generally held, right? Like it's I don't think too many people are saying DC has the upper hand with movies anymore.
No,
but it was
but as far as the cartoons go, and I feel like the comics, like hands down, I think DC has like better cartoons. But as far as like, and I'm not trying to say like the Amazing Spider-Man wasn't good, right? Or the X-Men and X-Men 97 coming out weren't good, right? I'm not saying that at all. But if you look at the qualities of the movies that like DC were putting out with Samurai Batman or the Long Halloween, right? Like all these movies that they were putting out, they were great. Now there has been some stinkers. Let's be real, they're not all perfect, right? I didn't watch Son of Krypton, and I choose not to. But there's like some great movies. But Marvel just like they haven't quite figured out that switch to be able to have like those good animated movies just yet. They're getting there, but they're not as consistent as what DC does.
And probably fair to say too, the graphic novel front is still DC's too. I mean, there's not as many like iconic graphic novel titles from Marvel. I'm sure a bunch of people chime in and tell me I'm wrong, and they're probably right because I'm. You can spend but so many hours a day with each of your nerdy pursuits, and there are going to be holes in your knowledge.
Yeah. But don't worry, all you DCEU fans out there, his handle is right there.
That's
in fact,
true.
he's gonna give it to you anyway because the last thing I do need from you is to let all of our listeners and our viewers know where they can find you.
Well, that's my handle. And you can also find at official PWI. One of my favorite things in the world is when somebody gets angry with a take that I have on my personal account, and then they tag the official PWI account that I'm also running and say like, official PWI, why do you employ this man? Like, I don't know. They should really get rid of him,
I saw that. You know what? I've seen that tweet probably numerous times, but I do remember seeing. Yeah.
There was the like, oh, they're gonna need to hear about this.
I love it because like someone was like, "You should fire this man," and you like responded by like, "Yeah, we're looking into it right now."
I like to call the PWI account that has, about 20,000 times the followers. No, they're not 20,000. What am I saying? Like 2,000 times the followers. 200 times. I can't do math. That's not what I'm hired for. It has, okay. I have like 3,600 followers on Twitter. PWI account has like close to 80,000. So I like to call that my burner account because people don't really know who's behind it.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. He gave you his handles. He told you where you could find both of his accounts. So what does that mean? Like every great part of a wrestling match, we got to take this home because this is the 3 Count Podcast presents Now Entering, and I'm your host, Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you up that mountain to go wrestling. But like every good show, you got to have someone who's been there, done that, and can do it more efficiently. So it's never about me. It's about who's in the ring. And you see him right there. That's right. the chief himself, the editor of PWI, Kevin McVeeny. And you know what that means. Tune into the next episode and be there, or you really just follow us on all of our social media platforms. You're subscribe to our YouTube channel. You're even following us on Facebook, or you're even like checking us out on Spotify, listen on Amazon Music, or even iHeartRadio, or whatever that little jingle is that they do. You're buying our merch on Pro Wrestling Tees. Or you're really just sharing this with your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your dog, your cat, your enemy, because we love haters too. So you do all that stuff, or you're really just kind of waiting for this episode to end. You're waiting for that outro, and then you're choosing another episode to listen to. Hawaii. What's going on? It is Clifford Red Dog Miller, the man that leads you up that mountain called wrestling. And what we need from you guys is to kind of show some support, right? We want you guys to go to our YouTube channel at the 3 Count Podcast, go on to our Twitch channel, 3 Count Pod, or even our Facebook page, 3 Count Podcast, and just give us a like, follow, subscribe, even give us a comment, right? Do all that cool stuff. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with your enemies, right? Or you can even come talk to us and just chat us up, right? Find us on Twitter at 3count_pod. Find us on IG and on TikTok at 3 Count Pod. Go ahead and leave us those comments. We want to hear from all of you guys. We're going to keep putting on videos and stuff like that. We want to keep making this content better, so we want your guys' support. Also, if you guys want to, go support us at prowrestlingtees.com/the 3 Count Podcast, or even find us on foryourwear.com. Give us the support. Show us your guys' love, because we want to give it right back to y'all. So, in the meantime, between time, love y'all.